Chapter 6, Null and Void. When I wake up later that afternoon, things seem a bit brighter. One of my cats is sitting on the pillow next to my face and looks so adorable and innocent, I realize I can't be as despicable a person as I feel like I am. I mean, I could still be horrible and have a cat like her, but she surely wouldn't choose to sleep right next to me if I didn't have some redeeming qualities. I come as close to bouncing out of bed as a person with a significant hangover can, and I feed the cats. Sometimes I feel like my life is made up of the act of pouring dry food into bowls and scooping wet food from cans on top of the dry food, and then the things I do in between. I know it's late for breakfast, I tell them in my cat voice after glancing at the clock and seeing it's 4 p.m. Let's consider this brunch. Then I realize I've become someone who's perfectly comfortable talking to her cats in cat-like voices and wonder if I am slowly losing my mind. I light a cigarette and pour 5 scoops of coffee grounds into my 1-cup coffee press while I boil the water. But I don't feel like I have the patience to let it steep, so I just stir and gulp it down. As I feel the caffeine hitting my central nervous system, it occurs to me that I haven't checked my home or cell messages in something like 2 days. Somehow, this gives me a great surge of optimism, which is further enhanced when the woman's computerized voice informs me that I have 3 new messages. I am loved and adored, I tell myself. Hey, it's Chris, I hear, and I'm so annoyed that my voicemail had the audacity to count this as an actual message and not like a sub-message that I delete it before he even gets much further. Second message. Hello, Amelia, it's your mother, I hear, and her voice makes me feel so guilty that I want to curl up in the fetal position and never get out. The rest of the message is about her best friend Sheila's daughter, who is, Mom explains, incredibly successful, dating the most amazing man on the planet, and excellent about calling her mother. Message number 3. Hey, it's me again, I hear, and recognizing Chris's voice immediately, I toss the phone across the room so that it smashes into the wall. The piece of plastic holding the battery breaks in 2, but Chris's voice withstands even that. I'm wondering if you'd want to, hang out, he's saying. I realize I have to get the hell out of my apartment immediately if I'm going to be able to get through this day without massively suicidal feelings overtaking me. I smash out my cigarette, put on my gym clothes, and drive the 3 blocks to the gym. How's it going, Amelia? I hear as I run on a treadmill with the latest issue of Absolutely Fabulous propped in front of me for reading material and music blasting through my headphones. I look up and see Chad Milan, a CAA agent I met like my second day in LA. Got any plans for tonight? Chad asks, and I shake my head and remove my headphones, accepting the intrusion. I had a really late night last night, I say, when I realize it's Saturday and Chad is about to jump to conclusions about my pathetic lack of a social life. What about you? Dinner with Sam and the guys, and then we're going to Doug's party in the hills, he says. He references the party like he assumes I know about it, so I act like I do. Chad continues to talk to me about where they're going to dinner, Wooley Oak, and why Doug's having the party. He was just made VP at Warner Brothers. And I'm so busy wondering why I get invited to so few parties that I barely notice that Chad stopped talking. His face wears the expectant look of someone who's just asked a question. I'm sorry? I ask. I just asked if you'd want to go to dinner on Thursday. I feel unprepared for the question and immediately conflicted. I couldn't in 1,000 years see myself dating Chad, but how the hell do I work that into casual conversation? How come other women seem to know how to say, actually, I don't see us having a romantic connection or some such? I'd love to, I say. That sounds great. It occurs to me that being taken out by a nice but dull agent may be exactly what I need. I don't even think I'm lying to myself when I tell him that I'm looking forward to it as I leave the gym a few minutes later. I mean, that's a whole bunch of days from now, I think. Who knows how I might feel by then? Even though working out usually enlivens me, I'm still sluggish after the gym. So I decide to stop by Kings Road for a cup of the strongest coffee in town. As I walk up, I'm surprised to see Brian sitting at one of the cafe's outdoor wooden tables. What the hell are you doing here? I ask. Brian lives in the valley. He gestures to a tall, lean, adorable man with dark brown hair sitting with him. Amelia Stone? Daniel Bromley, he says, and then adds, Daniel's the editor of Chat in from New York. And Amelia, he turns to Daniel and smiles. Well, you've just been hearing about Amelia. Indeed I have, Daniel says in an upper crust English accent as he shakes my hand. and I try to look completely cavalier. Chat is a combination of Vanity Fair and what Playboy used to be, and it wins national magazine awards while also managing to have millions of readers. Well, I'd heard of the editor Daniel Bromley. Somehow, no one had mentioned that he looked like a male model. And I certainly didn't know that Brian knew him or that one day I'd stumble upon them having coffee and discussing me. Uh-oh, I say with what I hope is a charming smile. Should I be worried? Not at all, Daniel says, as he pushes one of the iron chairs toward me. Brian was simply telling me that you're constantly regaling him with outrageous stories about your personal life. Oh, was he now? I ask, mock angry but secretly thrilled. I know that I probably should feel betrayed because God knows I've told Brian some incredibly intimate things that I never imagined him passing along in casual coffee conversation. But something about Daniel is making me too thrilled with the attention to care. What can I say? I shrug as I sit down. They're all true. Daniel smiles. So, what have you gotten up to? Anything interesting lately? He asks. And I find myself launching into the story of the night before in Truth or Dare, complete with the details about the dancing flasher, the girl-on-girl kiss, and the out-of-work actor wanting to take me away from all this and rub my stomach. Somehow, nothing I'm telling them sounds depressing and tragic anymore, but exciting and dramatic, a night in the life of a spontaneous party girl with outrageous and decadent friends. It's amazing how my perception can shift so thoroughly when I get the slightest glimpse of how other people are seeing something. And I don't know if it's the story, the fact that I feel like I'm walking through glue today, or simply that Daniel's smile is as white and bright and non-British as a Midwestern picket fence, but I find myself embellishing the stories a bit. I notice that Brian and Daniel are eating up every word, laughing hysterically the whole time. Brian drains his coffee and turns to Daniel. What did I tell you? He asks. If anything, you undersold her, Daniel replies. I'm reveling in the feeling I have right now of all this attention on me and feel their validation washing over me like a jacuzzi stream would on aching muscles. And then I suddenly panic, positive that I'm going to say something utterly inane that will screw up this fabulous impression I've managed to make on Mr. Debonair Hotshot magazine editor. I realize then that I need to get the hell out of Kings Road before Brian and Daniel discover just how backward and unimpressive I am. I glance down at my wrist and pretend I'm looking at a watch, even though I've actually forgotten to put it on today. Would you look at that? I'm late, I say, instantly shooting to my feet. Brian and Daniel look surprised by my abruptness, but before I can even begin to analyze that, I start making my way toward the door. Good to see you, Brian. Nice to meet you, Daniel. I sort of shriek as I knock into a Kings Road waitress. She never even got coffee, I can hear Daniel say in his crisp English tone as I scatter away like a complete freak. I should probably talk to hot men only while intoxicated, I think, as I rush back to my car. I wake up the next morning with the sense of purpose that anyone rising before noon and without a hangover on a Sunday morning must feel. Then I remember that I told Brian I'd go to this NBC party tonight. Brian tends to pass party invites along to me when he doesn't want to go, using phrases like really good career opportunities and important just to get out there and network. The parties always sound terribly exciting at the time, and I always feel flattered that I'm the one he wants to go in his stead. But the day of, I usually regret having said yes. Part of the problem is that invariably you have to go to these things alone. When you're at Brian's level, you get an automatic +1. But when the invite's been transferred to me, somehow that extra space they would have had at the event evaporates. I usually spend a lot of the party circling the room, constantly pretending I'm looking for someone specific, when I'm really just seeking out anyone I know or someone who looks friendly enough to approach. I'm overwhelmed with dread when I glance at the invite for the event, which will be held, as all these things seem to be, at one of those glamorous but nondescript Culver City hotels. Why did I tell Brian I'd love to go to this? What made this sound good at the time? I put the invitation down and remind myself to think positively. Who knows what could happen here? I might meet a television producer who decides I'm far too interesting to be wasting away at a cubicle and creates a show around me. When you live in LA and aren't physically deformed in some way, everyone always asks you why you're not trying to be an actress. Theatrical though I am, I always felt that I didn't have the struggle to be an actress in me. I mean, I feel shitty enough without lining up with a bunch of bitchy anorexics to compete for one line on Dawson's Creek. If acting was going to be in my future, I decided it would come to me because I'd been discovered like Lana Turner. Then I'd be able to have an assistant to deal with the stalker-type calls from Chris. A fabulous party is probably just what I need. After putting on my one little black dress that doesn't seem to attract the piles of cat fur that the others do, and my arch-abusing Jimmy Choos, I stumble across a stash in an envelope in my sock drawer. The sudden realization that I have some Coke feels like the best epiphany I've had in weeks, if not ever. It will be a perfect pick-me-up for the event, I think. Just the added boost I need to be the schmoozing powerhouse journalist of Brian's dreams. The Coke is inside a lotto ticket. My dealer Alex's signature Coke holder, because everyone in LA, even the drug dealers, has to have a thing that makes them stand out. Then I tap the powder out onto a CD case and use my Gap credit card to chop it up on my coffee table. I start to roll up a dollar bill before remembering I'd recently bought straws in order to avoid trying to pay for things and having all my bills emerge from my wallet folded a billion times and sprinkled in white powder. Grabbing the package of straws, I slide one out, cut it in half, and snort the 4 lines quickly, feeling the drip down my throat and excitement coursing through my veins. One of the cats jumps up on the table and starts swishing her tail over the CD case that still has a thin layer of Coke on top of it. In my more paranoid moments, I think that my cats know I'm doing Coke and are trying a just say no approach, but right now she just knows that I'm intently focused on something that doesn't involve petting her or opening cans of her food, and she wants to change that. I pick her up and place her on the floor, but she jumps back onto the table and knocks the CD case completely over, scattering bits of the powder into the off-white carpet. I feel crushed by this disaster and utterly convinced that everything I do always ends in this kind of catastrophic disappointment. There's only one way to cushion this realization. I make the next 2 lines extra thick, but they're so fat that they essentially kill my entire supply. I light a cigarette and lodge it into the silver Vanity Fair ashtray that I swiped from a book party at Kelly Lynch and Mitch Glazer's house. I feel infused with somewhat manic energy and suddenly decide that I should spritz on enough perfume to just give off a whiff of it. Then I transfer the contents of my frayed brown bag to my fake Prada nighttime one and get on the road. Between the spritz and the purse transfer, however, it occurs to me that I've done enough Coke now to have to be concerned about a come-down. If I'm to trust my powers of estimation combined with my body's consistency when it comes to drug reaction, this will happen sometime after appetizers are being served. I'll just have to drink my way through it, I decide. I only call Alex when I'm partying with friends, so I certainly won't be paging him to come meet me at some phony Culver City event. If I were to do that, it would mean I had a problem, I think, and remind myself that I'm acting like an amateur and perfectly capable of doing a little Coke and then going to an event. I wouldn't be so paranoid if I didn't have these thoughts, I say out loud, but then wonder if it's the other way around. My paranoia has developed legs and possibly arms too by the time I get to the event and valet my car. I try to shrug it off as I approach the bar with faith that a screwdriver will bring me back to happy buzz mode. The drink goes down smoothly and I realize that this had been my problem. I'd just been missing my lubricant. I decide to do a lap to look for anyone I know. I pass Tori Spelling, regaling a group of men with some story about her dog, Bill Maher, ogling an Asian woman's breasts to her seeming delight, and the stylist Philip Block, talking about how he picked Halle Berry's dress last year at the Oscar during my circle of the room. Finally, I come upon a face that's familiar because we actually know each other. Brett Lawson, a publicist who's always gifting celebrities and other allegedly influential people designer clothes. He's sometimes extremely nice to me and sometimes a bit dismissive, depending on who he's talking to. So interactions with him always feel a bit like a worthiness test. "Brett," I say, and he gives me the cheek kiss and then goes in for the other side. The 2-cheek kiss seems to be sweeping LA. "Amelia, do you know Trent?" he asks, nodding his head in the direction of a tan, gelled guy that I can tell is gay and also a publicist before he even opens his mouth. Trent and I shake hands as Brett explains that Trent works at Sony after having been Pat Kingsley's assistant for 6 years. I start to ask Trent about upcoming Sony releases, but when I see that Trent and Brett seem to be far more interested in each other than they are in talking shop with me, I realize I've tripped into the void, and there won't be any finding my way back tonight. The void is what can happen when you're on a little too much coke and a silent, paranoid, and completely insecure personality usurps the bubbly, impassioned, talkative one coke is supposed to give you. In this state, all I can think about is how uncomfortable I sound and how disinterested people seem to be in me. I've tried to escape the void with more lines, but moods, as most anyone who's done drugs can attest, are impossible to shift once you're high. I make a sudden decision to skip out on dinner and let my table mates endure the empty seat. I bid Brett and Trent goodbye, but they're too busy talking at each other to even hear me. The next morning, I'm walking up to my cubicle, thinking about how exhausted I am despite my 10 hours of Ambien-induced sleep, when I see Brian scribbling a note for me with one of his Sharpie pens. "Looking for me?" I ask. He seems incredibly harried. "Yeah, I was just leaving you a note. We have to talk." "Why?" I ask, instantly paranoid. "I'm worried about your lack of professionalism," he says, as if he were saying he was worried the office coffee wouldn't be strong enough. Doesn't he understand how abrupt he sounds, how horrifying this is to hear? Doesn't he know that my heart has instantaneously started beating faster than it has during any coke binge? How can he go from being my biggest fan, raving about me to charming British editors one day, to acting like a stern, humorless boss the next? Brian folds his arms, the bottom of his white button-down unearthing itself from the top of his jeans. "What happened to you last night? Melanie McGrath left me a message saying she thought she saw you walk in, but by the time dinner started, you were AWOL." "I felt sick," I protest somewhat weakly and remind myself this isn't, in fact, an outright lie. For dramatic effect, I add, "I threw up all night." "Amelia, you went in my place. If you felt sick, you should have at least introduced yourself to the publicist and told her how sorry you were that you couldn't stay for dinner." I glare. Maybe I didn't want to get her sick. "Save it, Amelia," he says, "and please don't let that happen again." I begin to feel thoroughly irritated with Brian. "Stop lecturing me," I say, and then probably too late, I add, "Please." "You may need a lecture," Brian responds, and I feel myself about to fly into a rage. "Enough," I say. "Will you please leave me alone so I can try to feel better?" Brian just looks at me and shakes his head. "Get it together, Amelia," he says as he walks away.